Catus Maximus here. This time it's just a quick teardown video to show the ratchet mechanism inside these old Proto roundhead ratchets. We actually have a Proto, and then we have a same ratchet, but it's a Challenger by Proto after they bought Challenger tools. And just for the information, you look on Google and it's, nearly impossible to find. Actually, I don't know if I was able to find any photos or anything of how this roundhead worked. And it's pretty neat because it seems that there are a lot of different designs for the ratchet mechanisms and roundheads, and I need to clean this one up a little bit. Thought I'd make a good video. So these old Protos, if you saw a ratchet like this on the Harbor Freight shelf today, you'd think it was a pretty cheap ratchet. I do like the knurling, but it just really not very good finish at all. We can see that the hole is not centered right there, although it is centered in this part, which means the forging is a little bit off. Other ratchets are usually pretty good from Proto, but this one happened to be a little bit funky. I also like it because this is my only round head, but that has a traditional pivot instead of being one of those roto heads where the pivot's right over the center. Always have liked the way this worked, and they really have a nice mechanism. I do have a quick release version I couldn't dig up, and I've had some issues with it self-reversing, but these haven't had any issue at all, and it's been pretty nice. I did, part of the inconsistency, at least I thought, was that they didn't put the last notch in the front of this, so it only goes over maybe 30 degrees. I don't know if that's actually intentional or unintentional, but it is kind of handy because if it's straight like this and you can't reach up or hit against something to push it straight, you can whip it a little bit and get it to come back over. So I've found that handy in some situations. Anyway, these do have a pretty nice ratchet mechanism, and they are going to be stronger than SK because I have taken this one apart. They just happen to be a little bit troublesome. They do use a snap ring or a spiral snap ring to keep them together. This one's really greasy, and it's always just a bit of a chore to try to use hooks and pick sets. It wants to twist around to try to get it out. In this situation, it's not bad because the ratchet mechanism is inset in the head, and then there's an undercut for the snap ring, so it actually holds the head in there pretty tight. And there is some anvil play, but it's really not so bad given that it's a round head. It always seems round head ratchets do have a little bit more play than their pair head counterparts. The trick is just trying to get it started. There is a little lip to get it your pick under there. Once you do that, you just have a little bit of a small flathead screwdriver, and you just go around and work it. Try not to bend it. You do want to be pretty gentle with these. They're really easily kinked, but you just go around and work it out of there. This thing is surprisingly greasy. Once we've got that little snap ring out, we can just slide this whole mechanism right out of there. So this is interesting because I've seen a couple different Proto mechanisms. I believe the quick release uses a mechanism where it's actually just a single pawl on each side that kind of shifts back and forth. This is their heavy duties design. As we can see here, there's quite a few teeth. These have not been engaging quite perfectly. There's a little bit of grease on that part. But this ratchet has always worked pretty well for me. And we can see indeed that this is definitely, it may not be pretty, but it is strong because we have 5 teeth on there. That's a pretty wide pawl, and it is 2 parallel pawls. So we actually have 10 teeth engaging, and it's parallel. I really like that a lot. And then there's our switch, so we can see them rocking back and forth. And there's been a few ratchets like the Cal and the Bonnie which use a system like this. We can see with the Proto that that's a fine tooth, kind of like the old Powercraft ratchets I reviewed. And except for that these pawls are probably even thicker than the Powercrafts. They're 5 tooth, but also being like a 50 tooth or 60 tooth ratchet, being a fine tooth ratchet, they just happen to make them really wide and double up just to ensure that you have a really nice solid engagement. And it helps explain why, even though this is an old funky Proto that was actually pretty gunked up here, I'm going to clean this up, how it's always worked really reliably. And a final note on this little unit, the reverse switch isn't like a separate piece that goes over the top of a little lever. It's integrated. It's one piece. This whole thing is actually stuck in there, so I kind of like that. This is a self-contained unit. Actually meaning that just dealing with the snap ring and pulling it out, you don't have to worry about losing any parts. Because it just comes apart in 3 parts, and you can, clean it up with some brake cleaner, put some new grease in there, and then put it back together. And I couldn't find like the original documentation, but if we look inside here, there's a lot of teeth in there. I think this is actually like a 72 tooth or something, and this thing was made decades ago. And I do like how these ratchets have a really narrow, low diameter head, easily the same width. They're just a little bit taller, but basically the same width as any modern pear head. Anyway, this is just a video to just add for tool aficionados so they can really see. And what we've seen with many of the round head ratchets I've been taking apart is that SKs, as far as this overall strength and build quality, actually fall pretty far down the list. We've seen Cals, Bonnies, Powercrafts, and the Wizards, Duros. And then these Protos are they're fine tooth, and they are still probably some of the strongest ones I've seen next to those. Maybe the Icon Roto heads, those have huge balls in them too. But this really is, shows one of the reasons you would get something like a Proto is these ratchets were really built to be, quite frankly, beat on. And to be used hard for a long duration of time. There is good steel in there because I cleaned this up, and these teeth look just fine. They look absolutely perfect. So it doesn't, so even though an old Proto may not look nice, it certainly is nice and reliable. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.